The Space Between Words, Part 1, the part where the universe gets funny. Chapter 1, Books Don't Ghost You. Okay, so here's the thing about Bozeman in October. It's the kind of beautiful that makes you feel guilty for being inside. And I'm always inside. The mountains are doing that thing they do in the fall, wearing all that orange and gold like they know exactly how gorgeous they are. And I'm standing in the stacks of the Wren Library at Montana State University, reshelving a cart full of philosophy books and having a deeply personal argument with Nietzsche. Not out loud, I'm not that far gone. Yet. The argument was internal, which is my preferred battlefield, and it went something like this. Nietzsche says God is dead and we've killed him. And I say that whoever decided to put the philosophy section on the 3rd floor with no elevator access on cart days is the real monster. That's pretty much the state of my intellectual life at 27. My name is Payton Freeman, and I am a librarian. A real one. With the master's degree and the reading glasses I don't technically need but wear anyway, because they make me feel authoritative. I love my job. I love the smell of books. Don't you dare make that face. It's a real smell and it has a real name. Petrichor is for rain, and bibliosmia is for books. Look it up. I love the quiet. I love the way the afternoon light comes through the tall windows of the 3rd floor and turns everything amber and gold. What I do not love is my boss. But we'll get to Paul Sanders. I need you to brace for that one. Right now, let me tell you about the Tuesday afternoon that blew up my very carefully constructed, very comfortable, very intentional life. Because I had a good life. I had a routine. I had a Tuesday podcast, a Wednesday wine night I mostly did alone with a good book, a Thursday standing order at the Thai place on Main, and a weekend that belonged entirely to me and whatever story I was currently living inside. It was a good life, it was a quiet life, and then the universe, which I now believe to be a comedian with impeccable timing and absolutely no chill, sent Luke Blackwood back to Bozeman. I was on my knees, literally, down on the floor in the stacks, trying to wrestle an oversized art history volume back onto the bottom shelf where it absolutely did not want to go, when my phone buzzed in my cardigan pocket. A cardigan. Yes, I own 17 of them. This one was caramel brown with little wooden buttons, and it was, objectively, perfect. The text was from my mother. Guess who is back in town? With 4 exclamation points and a screaming face emoji. I sat back on my heels and stared at the screen. My mother communicates exclusively in exclamation points and emoji, which is a personality trait I've made peace with. Who? I typed back. Because I genuinely had no idea. My mother's social circle was broad and enthusiastic, and back in town could have meant anyone, from my cousin Delia who'd been in Denver for a conference, to the Hendersons who'd gone to Arizona for a timeshare thing. The 3 little dots bounced for what felt like an unreasonably long time. Luke Blackwood! With 5 exclamation points and 3 star-eyed emojis. Oh no. I sat there on the library floor, between Kant and Kierkegaard, and felt the past 5 years rearrange themselves in my chest like furniture being moved in the dark. Painful and disorienting, and you just keep banging your shins on things. My thumbs hovered over the phone. Oh wow, I typed. Which was the most catastrophically inadequate response in the history of human language. He bought the Larson Construction Company. He's starting his own business here. Isn't that wonderful? His mother is beside herself with happiness. And of course, she added a cry emoji and a heart. I looked up at the books around me. Plato, Aristotle, Descartes. All those brilliant men, and not one of them, had written a single page about what to do when your childhood best friend, the one you'd been quietly, privately, devastatingly in love with since you were approximately 17 years old, suddenly moved back to the town you'd very carefully made your home after he left. Thanks for nothing, philosophy. So wonderful, I typed back. Tell his mom hi from me. I put the phone in my pocket, pressed my forehead against the cool spine of a Kierkegaard anthology, and let out the kind of breath that starts in your toes. Luke Blackwood was back. Luke Blackwood, who had 6 feet and 3 inches of lean, dark-haired trouble written all over him. Luke Blackwood, who had sky-blue eyes that were genetically unfair and a laugh that I swear could rearrange your internal organs if you were standing close enough. Luke Blackwood, who had been my best friend and my next-door neighbor and my absolute undoing for the better part of my conscious life. Luke Blackwood, who had driven away from Bozeman 5 years ago in a truck full of his belongings to manage construction projects in Seattle for his uncle's company, and who had sent me off-and-on texts and the occasional ridiculous meme, and never, not once in 5 years, given me a single concrete reason to stop loving him. Which was rude, honestly, very rude. I got up off the floor, smoothed my cardigan, pushed my glasses up my nose, and got back to reshelving books. This was fine. Everything was absolutely fine. Let me back up. Because you need some history here. And also because the history is where this whole thing gets complicated. And the complicated is where it gets interesting. At least, that's what I've told myself. Luke Blackwood grew up in the blue house next door. I grew up in the yellow house with the white shutters that my mom repainted every other summer like clockwork. We were the kind of neighborhood kids who wore paths between yards, who knew which back gate squeaked and which one you could push silently, who had a whole communication system based on which bedroom light was on and what time. He was 2 years older, which, when you're 7 and 9, means he was basically an adult, a god among children, a boy who could throw a baseball with accuracy and had already lost all his baby teeth. I thought he was impossibly cool. He thought I was the weird little girl next door who read books in the tree in her backyard and occasionally fell out of it. Both of these things were accurate. We were friends the way neighborhood kids are friends, by proximity and habit and the particular boredom of summer. And then middle school hit, and the world got weird the way it does, and we ran in different circles for a while. Him with the sports crowd, me with the library club, which was not a social power move, but which I maintain was the correct choice. But here's the thing about small towns. They pull you back to each other. There were still barbecues, still his family's 4th of July parties that my parents dragged me to, still the occasional car ride where our mothers conspired to carpool, and we'd sit in the back seat and not know what to say to each other for approximately 30 seconds before he'd say something ridiculous that made me laugh, and we'd be fine again. He was always easy like that, easy to be with. And then I was 17, and he was 19, and home for his first college winter break, and something happened to my entire cardiovascular system every time he walked into a room. This was inconvenient. I want to be clear that I recognized at the time how inconvenient this was. Luke didn't notice. Of course he didn't. He was Luke. He was the fun one, the loud one, the one everyone gravitated toward at parties. He had girls calling the house phone. Remember house phones? Constantly. And he managed to be good-natured and charming about all of it. And I sat in my bedroom next door and had very complicated feelings about that. I told myself it would pass. It did not pass. And then I graduated high school and enrolled at Montana State because I'd gotten a good scholarship, and Bozeman was home, and the library science program was exactly what I wanted, and the universe, that comedian I'm telling you, put me right back in Luke Blackwood's orbit. Because he was already there, 2 years in, living on campus, knowing everybody, doing Luke things, and that's where the story really starts. Chapter 2. The Education of Payton Freeman. Not the kind you get in class. College Luke was essentially neighborhood Luke, but turned up to 11. He'd filled out. That's the polite way to say it. He'd been lanky and tall in high school, all elbows and long legs, and that dark hair that always needed a cut. By the time I showed up on the Montana State campus with my twin bed sheets and my embarrassingly large box of books, he had shoulders. Actual defined shoulders. And forearms. I don't want to talk about the forearms, but I would be lying if I left them out. He found me on move-in day. I was struggling with the box of books. Of course, it was the box of books. It was always going to be the box of books. Trying to navigate a propped open door with something that weighed approximately as much as a small child, and a pair of large, capable hands appeared from nowhere and just took it. You brought your whole personal library. Not a question. He was already walking. The box held like it was nothing. I brought essentials. I scrambled to keep up with his stride. Luke, you can't just take someone's box. I can when they're about to drop it on their foot. He glanced back over his shoulder, and there was that grin. I had forgotten, strategically and with great effort, how that grin worked on me. My traitorous heart performed some kind of complicated maneuver. Payton Freeman, you look exactly the same. I graduated high school. I'm very different. You're wearing a flannel shirt and carrying books, and your hair is doing that. He gestured vaguely at my head. Thing? My hair was doing its usual thing, wavy and layered, and occasionally possessed. You look different, I said, because it was true, and because I needed to establish that I had noticed this as a purely observational fact. Clinically. Academically, even. Good different or bad different, just different. He grinned again and took my box all the way to my room and helped me muscle my bed frame together, when it turned out I'd been reading the instructions upside down, which could have happened to anyone. And by the time he left that first evening, hands in his pockets, telling me he'd take me to breakfast at the Union tomorrow because the dining hall had a waffle station and I'd be dead inside not to appreciate that, I had already made a decision. The decision was no. No to the thing I was feeling. No to the way my brain lit up around him. No to all of it. He was my childhood friend, my neighbor, my buddy. And that was what he wanted, and what he wanted mattered more to me than what I felt. Because that's how loving someone quietly works. You put their comfort first. You become very good at it. I was exceptional at it. I should have gotten an academic credit. Freshman year then, Luke was a junior, busy with his civil engineering coursework and his construction management classes and his approximately 9,000 friends, and I was figuring out college, which is mostly figuring out who you are when you're not standing in someone else's house at their schedule. I loved it, actually. I loved the library and my tiny dorm room and my classes and the particular freedom of building a self from scratch. And I loved having Luke around, which was the problem, because he was around, more than I expected. Breakfast at the waffle station became a regular thing. He'd text me when there was a game, drag me out to watch the Bobcats play under the lights, buy me a hot chocolate because he knew I thought beer at cold sporting events was masochistic, and I thought it was cute that he still tried to get me to drink one every single time. He'd knock on my dorm room door with terrible movies and popcorn. He included me, always, everywhere. And I loved him for it, which was the entire problem, start to finish, no exceptions. He's just being Luke, I told myself, approximately 40 times a day. This is what he does with everyone. Sure, Payton, sure it was. There was a girl sophomore year, his sophomore year, my freshman year. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on her because, frankly, she doesn't deserve the real estate, but she was in my intro to literature class, and she was perfectly nice, and she had red hair, and she held his hand at a game I'd come to with them, and I spent the entire second half watching the Bobcats play and feeling like I'd swallowed a stone. That was the night I started really internalizing the rule, this is friendship, Payton. Accept it. Love it for what it is. Don't ruin it by wanting more. The red-haired girl didn't last. None of them did, particularly. Luke dated the way most guys that age date, enthusiastically and with a short attention span, and he never seemed crushed when things ended. He'd shrug and make some joke about it and be completely fine by the following Thursday. I, watching from the sideline, was not always completely fine, but I got very good at performing fine. I had a gift for it. And then Tiffani VanBuren happened, and everything got worse. Look, I don't want to be unfair. Let me try really hard to be fair. Tiffani VanBuren is objectively beautiful. Platinum, blonde, tall, the kind of effortless put together that I always suspected required enormous secret effort, with perfect winged eyeliner and a laugh that carried across crowded rooms like it was being amplified. She was a junior when she and Luke started dating my sophomore year. She was in the Tri-Delta house, and she knew everyone, and she had this particular quality of taking up all the air in a room without anyone exactly being able to say why. She did not like me. She was polite about it, at first in that very specific way that women can be polite, while simultaneously making it completely clear that you are not welcome. Lots of barely there smiles, comments about how sweet it was that Luke had a little friend he looked out for, emphasis on little. Once, memorably, she touched my cardigan sleeve like it was an artifact from an anthropological dig and said, "Oh, is this vintage?" in a tone that suggested vintage was a generous interpretation. Luke never noticed any of it. Luke, bless him, is approximately as perceptive as a golden retriever when it comes to social subtleties. He registered warmth, enthusiasm, and obvious hostility, but the middle frequencies were mostly lost on him. When Luke wasn't around, Tiffani sharpened. Nothing you could really grab onto, just small, precise things. A comment about how the library must be so nice for someone who wasn't really a social person. A raised eyebrow at something I said in a group. The very particular weapon of acting like I simply wasn't there in conversations, which works exactly as well as you think it does on someone who already spends half her time feeling invisible. I didn't tell Luke, because telling Luke would have made things awkward, and awkward would have pushed him away, and pushing him away was the one thing I absolutely could not do. So I swallowed it, all of it, and showed up to the things he invited me to, and sat on the far side of the group from Tiffani, and told myself I was being mature. I was being a doormat, but I told myself I was being mature. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't know for years, was that in Luke's senior year, at the end of year party that I'd left early because I always left early, something happened. But we'll get there. Quick request: if you find yourself enjoying the narrative, please hit that like button. It really helps me know that I have hit the mark with these stories. If you would like to leave a location suggestion for future stories, drop it in the comments. Chapter 3. 5 years is a long time to practice being fine. He left in June, 5 years ago. His truck was loaded up, this big, dark blue F-250 that he'd had since he was 20. The truck that I'd ridden shotgun in so many times that I knew exactly which cup holder was the wobbly one. And his mom was crying, and my mom was crying, and my dad shook Luke's hand with the particular gravity men reserved for significant departures, and Luke just laughed and hugged everybody and told them all to relax. It was Seattle, not the moon. He hugged me last. He was warm and solid and smelled like that particular combination of sawdust and clean laundry that was just Luke, and he held on for a beat longer than I expected, and I pressed my face briefly against his shoulder and made myself a promise. I was letting this go. I was going to put it down and leave it down and get on with my actual life. "You're gonna be fine," he said into my hair, which was hilarious because he was the one leaving. "You're gonna be great, Pay. You're gonna run that library inside of 2 years. "It's a university library," I said, muffled. "There are hierarchies. It takes time." "You'll find a workaround." He pulled back and looked at me, and I was extremely busy looking at his collarbone so as not to do anything embarrassing with my face. "Text me when you get them to let you reorganize the whole Dewey Decimal System, or whatever it is you're planning." "I'm planning nothing, Payton," I looked up. Those blue eyes, direct and warm, and seeing me in the way that made my lungs do complicated things. "Take care of yourself, okay?" "Okay," I said, very normal, very fine. He drove away, and I watched the truck until it turned the corner and was gone, and then I went inside and made tea and read 200 pages of Jane Eyre in one sitting, which is a coping mechanism I stand fully behind. And then I did what I told myself I was going to do. I let it go. I put it down. I went to work, finishing my master's, getting my job at the Wren Library, moving into my apartment on South 11th, and I built the life I described at the beginning of this story. The good one. The quiet one. Luke and I texted, not constantly, but regularly. He'd send something ridiculous, a meme about construction disasters, a photo of some Pacific Northwest thing he found funny, a voice memo where he did an impression of his uncle that I will admit made me almost fall off my couch once. I'd send back book recommendations he'd never read, and sarcastic commentary on his memes, and occasional photos of the mountains, because Seattle had water and Seattle had mountains too, but they weren't these mountains. It was friendship. It was a perfectly functional, appropriate, affectionate friendship, and I was fine. I was fine. I'm going to need you to just accept that and move on, because we don't have time for me to deconstruct every moment over 5 years where I was slightly less than fine. We'd be here until spring. Here's what you need to know about the Tuesday he came back, which was the same Tuesday I was on the floor with Nietzsche and my mother's texts. After I put my phone away and finished reshelving, I went down to the circulation desk and helped a very stressed grad student locate 3 specific journals and a database she hadn't known existed, and I got her sorted out, and then I sat in my little office behind the desk. It's barely an office. It's more of an office suggestion, a repurposed storage room with good lighting, and a window I've decorated with exactly 4 plants, and I had my afternoon tea. Earl Grey. No sugar. The mug says, "Sorry I'm late, I didn't want to come." And it was a gift from my best friend Cam, who teaches English comp and has excellent taste in both humor and cheese. And I sat there with my mug and my plants and my very nice small office, and I thought, okay, he's back, that's fine, we're adults, we're friends. It's been 5 years and I am a different person. A more self-possessed, more grounded, more settled person, and I am going to be absolutely fine. I had barely finished congratulating myself on this mature and measured response when my phone rang. His name lit up the screen like a dare. Luke Blackwood. A phone call. Not a text. An actual phone call like it was 2015. I stared at it through 2 full rings, which was enough time for my cardiovascular system to remind me in no uncertain terms that 5 years of being fine had left approximately 0 impact on the fundamental situation. Then I answered because he was my friend, and answering my friend's calls was a normal thing to do. "Hey," I said, and I was proud of how normal that sounded. Payton Freeman. The voice. His voice. 5 years, and it was exactly the same, warm and easy, with that laugh always waiting just behind it. "You have 30 seconds to guess where I'm calling from." "Your truck," I said. "You're always in your truck." A pause. That's freaky. How'd you know? Because there's road noise and you're calling instead of texting, which means your hands aren't free but you're using Bluetooth, which means you're driving and you're always in that truck. See, this is why I need you, he said, and I pressed my thumb into the edge of my desk hard enough to hurt, just to give myself something to concentrate on besides that sentence. I'm 20 minutes out. I'm coming back to Bozeman. I know, Mom texted. Your mom is a gossip. My mom is enthusiastic. He laughed, and there it was. Right in my chest, exactly where it had always been. 5 years of careful construction and one laugh, and I was 17 again in all the worst possible ways. So I need a favor, he said. Of course you do. I need someone to help me scope out the office space I'm renting on Monday. Tell me if I'm making a mistake. Real estate makes me nervous. You're good at spatial reasoning. I'm a librarian. You organize thousands of books into a logical system that anyone can navigate. That's spatial reasoning. Fair point. Annoying, but fair. What time Monday? Noon? I'll buy lunch after. Fine. Very casual. Noon is fine. You're a lifesaver, Pay. I could hear the grin. I missed you. You missed having someone who could find things in a library system. That too. The grin was definitely audible now. See ya Monday. He hung up and I sat there in my small office among my 4 plants, holding the phone, having completely and utterly failed to remain as fine as advertised. This was going to be a problem. Part 2, The Best Laid Plans of Mice and Librarians. Chapter 4, Monday, Noon, and Other Disasters. I want to tell you that I did not spend any part of Sunday selecting an outfit for a Monday lunch that was completely casual and meant absolutely nothing. I cannot tell you that. I went through 4 options. The first was too dressed up. A wrap dress I'd bought for Cam's birthday dinner, which would have been weird and obvious, and I immediately put it back. The second was too dressed down, my favorite old MSU sweatshirt, which was comfortable but sent the message that I'd given zero thought to this, which was inaccurate. The third was trying too hard in a different direction. The fourth, dark jeans, my cream-colored cashmere sweater that I'd bought myself for Christmas and hadn't worn yet because I was saving it for something, a pair of ankle boots, was exactly right. Normal. Effortless. I definitely hadn't given it 4 tries. I walked to the office space he'd rented because it was on Main and only 6 blocks from my apartment. And the October air was doing that perfect cold snap thing where it smells like leaves and impending snow and everything feels a little more alive. My cheeks were pink by the time I got there. This was, I told myself, entirely because of the cold. He was standing outside. Of course he was. Because the universe wanted me to have a moment of seeing him before I'd had a chance to compose myself, and so there he was, leaning against the building wall with his arms crossed and his phone out, in jeans and a dark jacket and work boots, taller than I always somehow forgot, with that dark hair curling slightly at his collar, and the jaw that now had a more definite shadow to it than the Luke I'd last stood next to 5 years ago. He looked up. He grinned. "Oh no," said every single cell in my body, in unison. "There she is." He pushed off the wall, and his stride was easy and long, and he crossed the sidewalk and pulled me into a hug that lifted me completely off my feet, because he always did that, and my boots left the ground, and my face went into his shoulder again. And I had approximately 2 seconds to experience the complete dismantling of 5 years of careful emotional maintenance before he set me back down. "You're taller," I managed. "You're shorter." "That's physically impossible. I'm the same height I've always been." Which is very short. He held the door open, and I walked past him, and he smelled exactly the same, sawdust and clean laundry, with maybe something new underneath it, a darker note, like leather or cedar. I filed this away, as information I did not need. The office space was good, honestly good, exposed brick on one wall, big windows, enough square footage for a small crew, and a proper drafting area. Luke walked through it the way he walked through everything, with easy confidence and that particular attention to structure that I'd watched develop over years, his eyes going to load-bearing walls and window placement the way mine went to shelving capacity and traffic flow. "Ceiling height is good," he said, craning up. "The light on the east side is going to be harsh in the morning." He looked at me. "How do you know that?" "Building faces east. Windows are big. You'll want UV film or good blinds for wherever you put drafting tables." He pointed at me. Spatial reasoning. "I'm just a librarian." "You're my favorite librarian." He was already walking the perimeter, looking at outlets, testing a wall with the flat of his hand in a way that clearly meant something to him. "What do you think?" Total call. I looked at the space. It had good bones, Real bones, not just metaphorical ones, something alive in it. I think it's right, I said. I think you signed the lease. He turned around and looked at me with that direct blue gaze, and something in it was more serious than the last 15 minutes had been. Yeah? Yeah. He nodded once, like that was the verdict he needed. Okay, lunch. I owe you a meal. We went to a Mexican place 2 blocks down because Luke was constitutionally incapable of walking past a Mexican restaurant without going in, and we sat in a window booth, and I ordered a quesadilla because I was nervous, and quesadillas are simple and safe and don't require you to make complex decisions. Luke ordered something with 4 components and extra jalapenos, and then sat across from me and actually looked at me the way he did when he was really looking, not just being friendly, and I became very interested in rearranging my silverware. So, he said. So, I said, 5 years. 5 years. You look, he tilted his head, studying me, and I had the exact same feeling as being examined under a lamp. Good. You look really good, Pay. You saw me 5 years ago, not 50. I'm supposed to look the same. Different good, like, he gestured, which was unhelpful. Like you figured something out. I had no idea how to respond to that, so I drank my water. He told me about Seattle, about his uncle's company, about the projects he'd managed, the commercial builds and the residential renovations, the absolute nightmare of a mixed-use development in Capitol Hill that had taken 3 years and approximately 1,000 years off his life expectancy. He told me about why he'd come back. An opportunity to buy out a retiring contractor's company here, his own crew, the chance to build something that was actually his. He talked with his hands the way he always had, leaning in over the table, and every now and then he'd ask me something, and his attention would shift to me completely, and I'd answer and feel seen in a way I'd spent 5 years trying not to miss. This is nice, I thought. We can do this. This is friendship. This is fine. What about you? He stole a chip from the basket. Library treating you well? You taking over the whole operation yet? I am the special collections coordinator now, he pointed at me. Called it. You said 2 years. It took 4. I was close. You were encouraging. Something crossed his face, warm and brief, there and gone. He looked down at his food and then back up. You seeing anyone? And there it was. The casual, friendly inquiry. Are you seeing anyone? The question that people ask when they're curious. The question that best friends ask because they're interested in your life. The question that didn't mean anything. Not right now, I said, with the ease of someone who has practiced this conversational move extensively. You? Nope. He popped the pages casual. Entirely casual. Clean slate coming back? Clean slate. Right. I ate my quesadilla and we talked about other things. His mom's garden, my mom's obsession with the new HGTV show, the fact that there was apparently a great new taco truck on 19th, and it was easy and warm and exactly what I'd told myself it would be. And I thought, I can do this. I'm doing this. What I did not know, sitting in that window booth in the October light, was that 3 things were currently in motion that would make doing this considerably more complicated. 1. Paul Sanders, my boss and professional nightmare, was in the middle of concocting a situation that would require me to need help. 2. Tiffani VanBuren had heard through the Bozeman social network, which operates with the efficiency and coverage of a very small but extremely motivated intelligence agency, that Luke Blackwood was back. And 3. Luke, for reasons I was nowhere near understanding yet, had come home. Not just to Bozeman. Home in the specific direction of wherever I was. I didn't know that last part yet. I was eating a quesadilla and working very hard at being fine, and the universe was laughing itself sick somewhere just off stage. Chapter 5. Paul Sanders and the Art of Making Everything Worse. Paul Sanders was 53 years old, with the salt and pepper hair of a man who'd decided that was distinguished, the smile of a man who'd learned it worked on people, and the particular brand of authority that comes from holding a title that matters slightly more than it should in a small institution. He was the director of library services and special collections at Montana State University, which meant he was my boss, which meant he had opinions about my work that he delivered in the form of what I can only describe as implication. Paul communicated in implication. He never said anything directly if he could say it sideways. A direct, your work is good, was beyond him, but well, for the resources we have available, I think we manage reasonably well, while looking at your budget report. That was Paul's version of a compliment. He'd been director for 6 years. I'd been working under him for 3, after my predecessor retired and Paul was moved in above me on the org chart, and in those 3 years I had developed what I can only call a finely tuned radar for his particular type of uncomfortable. He called me into his office on Wednesday, 2 days after the lunch with Luke, which meant I was still in a slightly destabilized emotional state that I would not be admitting to. Paul's office was nicer than mine. This is a fact of institutional hierarchy that I had made peace with, but his was also decorated in a way that suggested he had either very expensive taste or a very patient interior designer. Leather chairs, framed prints, a desk that cost more than my car. He sat behind it with his fingers laced and his smile on, and I sat in the leather chair across from him and held my portfolio notebook in my lap like a shield. Payton. He said my name like it had 2 more syllables than it did. I wanted to talk to you about the Hargrove Collection. The Hargrove Collection was a private manuscript donation that had come to the university the previous spring. Historical documents, letters, some rare books. My project, my proposal, my favorite thing I was currently working on. Of course, I said, the university is hosting a faculty appreciation event in November. The president is very interested in featuring the collection as part of a small exhibition. Paul smiled. I think you'd be perfect to coordinate it. On the surface, a compliment, a vote of confidence, an opportunity. Under the surface, where Paul always lived, I've committed you to a project I haven't told you the full scope of, and I'll take the credit for the result. I had done this dance before. What's the timeline? I asked. 6 weeks. 6 weeks for an exhibition was tight. Not impossible, but tight. I'd need additional resources for. Of course. The wave of the hand. The smile. I'm sure you'll manage beautifully. You always do. I looked at him and he looked at me, and in the space between us was everything that was wrong with working for Paul Sanders, which was specifically this. He knew I cared about my work. He knew I would do it right regardless of resources. And he knew, with the casual confidence of a man who'd been using this move for 20 years, that I wouldn't push back too hard because I needed this job and he controlled my position. The Hargrove Collection deserved this exhibition. That was the thing. It was genuinely a good opportunity for the collection, for the university, for everything I actually cared about. And Paul knew that caring would override my frustration with the execution. There's one other thing, Paul said, and something in his tone shifted just slightly, a degree warmer. Which was worse, actually. Warmth from Paul was a warning sign. The event has a gala component. Faculty, donors, administration. I'd very much like for you to be there. Not just in a supporting role, but front and center, really representing the project. I waited. I'm between +1s at the moment, Paul said, and I think you and I could make quite the team for an event like this. There it was. Implication, with an invitation attached. The thing about Paul was that he'd been doing this for almost a year. Little things. A comment here, a look there, the way he'd linger in the doorway of my office a beat too long. Nothing egregious enough to report. Nothing direct enough to address directly. Just the constant grinding discomfort of a superior who was using the power imbalance like a tool. I was very tired of it. I'll certainly be there to represent the project, I said, with the precision of someone choosing every word. In my professional capacity. His smile stayed exactly where it was. Of course. A beat. My door is always open, Payton. If you need anything for this exhibition. The emphasis on anything did what he always intended it to do, made it clear that anything had a cost attached to it. I walked back to my office, shut the door, sat in my chair, and stared at my 4 plants. One of them, a small pothos I'd named Gerald, looked particularly empathetic. I know, Gerald, I said. Gerald swayed slightly in the air vent breeze. I know. I want to be clear. I wasn't without options. I could have gone to HR. I probably should have gone to HR. But the calculus of reporting something when you can't point to a single direct instance, when it's all implication and atmosphere, is a complicated and exhausting one, and I'd been doing that calculus for months and coming up with different answers every time. What I needed was the exhibition to be a success, and then I needed to find a way to move laterally to a position that didn't put me under Paul Sanders anymore. That was the plan. A slow, careful, sensible plan. The plan did not account for Luke Blackwood, but very little in my life did. Chapter 6, Cam's Opinion, which she was going to give me anyway. Wednesday night wine had started as an ironically named solo ritual and had evolved over the past 2 years into an actual thing with an actual second person, because I'd met Cameron Okafor at a faculty event, and she'd been standing at the edge of the room looking like she was solving a complex equation in her head, and I'd said, "I keep adding up how long until I can reasonably leave," and she'd said, "My current estimate is 40 minutes, and we'd been friends ever since." Cam was 30, with close-cropped natural hair and an academic's tendency to cite sources in casual conversation and a deeply unacademic appreciation for reality television that she was very open about. She taught English composition to first-year students, which she described as explaining to 18-year-olds that feelings are not arguments, and she did it with a patience that I admired enormously, given that her threshold for nonsense in other areas was approximately 0. I told her about Luke over the Montepulciano I'd opened because it was that kind of week, and I watched her face do the thing it did when she was processing something. "Okay," she said. "Okay, what?" "Okay, that's a lot." She tucked her feet up on my couch. We were in my apartment, which was small and warm and had, I will not apologize for this, an entire wall of bookshelves, and wrapped both hands around her glass. "He's back. He called. You went to lunch." "Yes." "And?" "And nothing. We're friends. We're catching up." Cam gave me a look that I can only describe as academically skeptical. "Payton, Cameron, you told me about Luke Blackwood approximately 11 minutes after I met you, which is a record for you, given that you normally circle information like you're protecting it from a natural disaster." She tilted her head. "You've been in love with him since you were 17. I have very manageable feelings about Payton." I drank wine. "Okay," she said again, settling in, which meant she'd decided something. "Here's what I think." "I didn't ask what you think. You absolutely asked what I think by calling me and saying, 'Can you come over, bring wine?' That is a request for opinions." "Fair. Fine. What do you think?" "I think you've been waiting for something to change, and now something is changing, and you are extremely scared." She said this with the gentle directness of someone who'd been my real friend long enough to know how to say hard things without it feeling like an attack. And I think the scariest part isn't that he's back. It's that he's back and you still feel exactly the same way, and now you don't have distance as an excuse. I looked at my bookshelves. All those spines, all those stories, all those people who'd made terrible and wonderful decisions in the name of love, and suffered through them and come out the other side. What if nothing's changed for him? I said. Not a question, really. More like a thing I needed to put in the air. Cam was quiet for a moment. "Then you find out," she said finally. "And you're sad for a while, and then you're okay. But at least you know. And if I don't try, if I just stay, then you're sad for the rest of the foreseeable future anyway, but more efficiently." She raised her glass. Less information, same result. I hated when she was right. She was right a lot. "There's also the Paul situation," I said, because I needed to change the direction of this, and also because the Paul situation was actually a problem I needed to think about. Her expression shifted to something flatter and harder. "Tell me." I did. The exhibition, the +1 comment, the anything. Cam listened with the stillness she got when she was really angry. Not the animated kind of angry, the quiet kind that was actually more alarming. When I finished, she drank half her glass in one go. "You need to document everything," she said. "I know. Every interaction, dates, what was said, context. I know, Cam. And if he escalates, I know." I pulled my knees up. "I'm working on the exhibition because the collection deserves it. And I'm figuring out the rest." She looked at me for a long moment. "You know what you need? If you say Luke Blackwood..." "I was going to say a better work situation," she said, "but I mean, the Luke Blackwood thing wouldn't hurt either." I threw a couch pillow at her. She caught it. Chapter 7. The part where things get complicated. Specifically on a Thursday evening at a bar I wouldn't have gone to voluntarily. Luke texted Thursday afternoon. "Some guys from the old crew are getting together tonight at the Bozeman tap room. Come." And then, before I could formulate a reasonable response, "Don't say you have plans, you don't have plans. And then, also, I already told them you'd come, so if you don't show up." I looked bad. I stared at the messages. My thumbs moved before my brain had fully approved the response. "You're the worst," followed by "what time." And that is how I ended up at the Bozeman tap room on a Thursday evening in my second-best jeans and a dark green top that I'd put on, because it was Thursday and not for any other reason, in a booth with Luke and 4 of his construction industry friends and a round of beers I'd mostly left untouched because I was doing my civic duty of being the person who remembered where everyone had parked. Luke's friends were exactly what you'd expect of Luke's friends. big, loud, good-natured, the kind of men who ribbed each other constantly and bought rounds without keeping score, and had opinions about structural load calculations that they expressed with genuine passion. I liked them. I liked most of Luke's people because his people tended to be real, which was a quality I rated highly. I was mid-conversation with a guy named Tanner about the wild history of MSU's campus buildings. Not everyone's idea of thrilling, but Tanner had asked, and I had information when I felt something change in the room. The way a room changes when someone walks into it who intends for rooms to change. I didn't see her right away. I saw Luke's face first. A flicker of something that crossed it too fast for me to read. Something that wasn't quite discomfort, but wasn't pleasure either. And then I followed the direction of his gaze. Platinum blonde. Perfect makeup. A smile that was already in full deployment. Tiffani VanBuren looked, if anything, more impressive than she had in college, in the way that beautiful women who work very hard at being beautiful get more impressive as they get older rather than less. She was in a silk blouse and heels, which for a Thursday at a taproom was either very bold or carefully calculated, and I would not put money on which. She was also walking directly toward our table, with purpose, with intention. Luke, the voice carrying through the room, the heads turning, the smile landing on him with the focused warmth of a spotlight. "Hey, Tiff!" He stood up because he was Luke, and he stood up when people arrived, and she kissed his cheek and touched his arm with the comfortable ease of someone who'd decided that was her right. "Didn't know you'd be here. I heard from Kara you might be here, and I thought..." She tilted her head, smile still operational. "Well, I just had to come say welcome home." And then, like a camera panning, her gaze found me. The smile did not drop. It didn't even flicker. It adjusted, just barely, just enough. "Payton?" The voice, very warm, very smooth. "Oh my goodness, it's been years." "It has." I agreed, which was accurate and non-committal and required no additional processing power, because I was using all my remaining processing power on keeping my face doing the right things. She was already turning back to Luke, the pivot so smooth you'd only notice it if you were watching for it. And I was watching for it because I'd had 2 years of being the person that pivot happened to. She sat down, not across the table, where Tanner had been, but next to Luke, in that particular claiming way that was entirely deniable as anything other than sitting in an available seat. And Luke did what Luke always did in social situations, which was to accommodate everyone and make it easy and be warm, and within 4 minutes they were talking, and I was on the outside of it, same as it ever was. I drank my beer, which I usually didn't, and talked to Tanner about buildings. This is fine, I thought. I don't have a claim here. This is just friends at a bar. This is nothing. But the thing about Tiffani VanBuren was that she never did anything without intention. And the glance she sent me across the table, over Luke's shoulder while he was saying something to the guy on his left, was so precise and so brief and so full of very old information that I felt it in my teeth. "Still here, Payton?" the look said. "Move along." Luke walked me out. That was a thing he did. Always had, always would, apparently. And I'd said my goodbyes and was putting on my coat when he appeared at my elbow with his jacket already on. "You don't have to," I started. "Don't be ridiculous." He held the door. The night air was cold and bright, that October cold that had some teeth in it, and Main Street was quiet-ish at 10 on a Thursday with a few people scattered on sidewalks. We walked without a particular destination, which was also a Luke thing. He processed better moving than standing still. "That wasn't weird, right?" he said after a block. "Tiff showing up. Why would it be weird?" He glanced at me sideways, "Just making sure. You dated years ago. She ran into you. It's not weird." Every word. True. None of the subtext. Spoken. "We're getting really good at this, Payton. Gold star." "She looks good," he said. Not like he was complimenting her to me. More like he was observing a fact he wasn't sure what to do with. "She does." I agreed, because she did. He was quiet for most of a block. "She asked if I wanted to get dinner sometime. Catch up." I processed this. "Okay." I said maybe. He looked at me again, and there was something in his expression I couldn't place. Something asking, almost. "Is that... Luke?" I stopped walking and looked up at him. All 6 feet 3 inches of him, in the October dark, with that searching expression. "You don't need my permission to have dinner with someone." "I know that." "Then why are you telling me?" He seemed to genuinely not know the answer to that. He looked away, at the mountains at the edge of the city, dark shapes against a darker sky, ran his hand through his hair, which he'd always done when he was working something out. "I don't know," he said. A pause. I wanted to tell you. We stood there on Main Street, and the cold settled around us, and I was acutely, painfully aware of the 3 or 4 inches between us. Then I'm glad you told me, I said, which was safe and warm and exactly what a good friend would say, and I meant it and also wanted to kick myself a little. He walked me all the way to my building, stood on the sidewalk while I found my keys, and when I looked back from the door, he was still there, hands in his jacket pockets, looking at me with that look again. I'm glad I'm back, he said. I'm glad you're back too, I said, which was the truest thing I'd said all night, and the most dangerous. Part 3, What We Don't Say Out Loud. Chapter 8, The Thing About Luke, from my brain at 2 a.m., uninvited. I want to tell you what it's like to be in love with your best friend. Not in the movie way. Not the rom-com way, where it's all misunderstandings and grand gestures and one perfect rainy kiss and then credits roll. The real way, which is quieter and more constant and more exhausting than any movie has the patience to show. It's the way you know exactly which laugh means he's genuinely delighted versus which laugh is the social one. It's knowing his coffee order without thinking about it. It's the way a song he'd mentioned once comes on and you think, Luke would like this, before you even consciously register the thought. It's 5 years of texting a man across 2 states and feeling a particular warmth when his name came up on your phone and telling yourself, over and over, patiently, firmly, that warmth was friendship. That warmth was appropriate. That warmth was enough. It's not enough. It was never enough. But you get practiced at telling yourself it is. Here's the thing I kept thinking about at 2 a.m. after the bar, lying in the dark with the city doing its quiet nighttime thing outside my window. He'd told me about Tiffani, unprompted, gone out of his way to be the one walking beside me on a cold street just to say, she asked, I'm thinking about it, and I wanted you to know. Why? That question sat in the dark with me for a long time. Because we're friends and he tells me things, said the sensible part of my brain. The part I'd built and reinforced over 10 years of careful construction. Because something about it felt like it needed your permission, said the other part. The part one tried to keep in a room with a good solid door. Both parts could be right. That was the maddening thing. With Luke, I could never fully rule out either interpretation, because he had always landed somewhere just past what friendship strictly required. He'd always included me one more time than necessary, walked me home one more block than needed, looked at me a beat longer than strictly called for. And I'd always talked myself out of what that might mean, because the alternative was doing something about it. And doing something about it meant risking the friendship, the history, the 10 years of him being the truest constant in my life. I was a coward about this one thing. I owned it. I was a coward about Luke Blackwood, and every other area of my life I was fine, and I'd made a separate peace with this. The issue was that he was back, and Tiffani VanBuren was circling, and Paul Sanders was making my professional life into an obstacle course, and I was lying in the dark at 2 a.m. doing math that didn't add up. Flashback. Junior year, his senior year, October. We were in the student union at a corner table, both doing work. Him with blueprints spread out, me with a stack of library science textbooks. The way we did a lot of that year, just existing in the same space, because it was easier than being in separate spaces. I had a coffee. He had the terrible energy drink he consumed with a frequency that alarmed me. Tiffani had texted him something. I'd watched the particular shift in his jaw when he read it, a slight tightening. And then he'd put the phone face down. She wants to meet my parents over break, he said. I underlined something in my textbook. Oh yeah? Yeah? He picked up his pen, put it down. That feels... He didn't finish the sentence. Like a lot? Like a step I'm not sure I want to take. He looked at me, and I looked at my textbook because his looking at me during these conversations was something I managed very carefully. What do you think? What do I think? Internally, I screamed, I think I know you better than she does, and you know that. I think when you're uncertain about something, you come to me and not her, which is data. I think I'm so in love with you that I'm sitting across from you, helping you navigate a relationship with someone else, and calling it friendship. I think you should trust your instincts, I said instead. If it doesn't feel right, it's usually not right. He was quiet for a moment, then, what do you think of her? Honestly? I closed my textbook. I looked at him. She's not right for you, I said. Quietly. Just that. He stared at me for a second, and something flickered in his expression. Why not? Because you come to me when you need to think through something. You don't go to her? I shrugged, looked away. Anyway, the silence after that was a particular kind of silence. The kind that means something is sitting between two people, and both of them know it, and neither one is ready to touch it. Yeah, he said finally. We went back to our work. That was the closest we ever got that whole year. Chapter 9. The Hargrove Collection, and the day everything got worse before it got better. The following 2 weeks were full enough that I could almost convince myself I wasn't thinking about Luke constantly. Almost. In the day, exhibition planning. The Hargrove Collection was approximately 400 items. Letters, diaries, photographs, a handful of rare books from a Bozeman family that had been here since the 1880s. I was in the processing room every morning by 8, working through the finding aid I'd update, working with our conservationist on what could be displayed safely, sketching rough layouts for the exhibition cases. It was absorbing work. It was work I loved. And if the work kept my brain occupied enough that I wasn't constantly running Luke-related mental loops, well, that was an added professional benefit. In between, Luke texted. Not constantly, but steadily. A question about what restaurants were good now, a photo of his new office space, he'd signed the lease, painted one wall a deep navy. It looked genuinely good. A complaint about the city permit process that was extremely warranted and that I could do nothing about. I texted back. We were normal, we were fine. I saw him on a Saturday when he helped Cam move a bookshelf. I'd mentioned she needed help, and he'd materialized with his truck and a dolly without being specifically asked, because that was exactly the kind of thing Luke did. And the three of us had ended up at the Thai place on Main afterward, and Cam had given me a very specific look over her pad Thai that I had pointedly ignored. She texted me afterward. Oh, he's in trouble. I texted back, stop. She sent me back 3 eye emojis and a popcorn one. The Paul situation got worse on a Thursday. I was in the processing room, gloves on, carefully examining a letter from 1923 that I was fairly certain had never been properly cataloged, when Paul appeared in the doorway with the particular energy of a man who wanted to appear casual and was not. Payton, how's it coming? Well, I didn't look up from the letter. Ahead of schedule, actually. Wonderful. He came in, which he didn't need to do, and stood too close to the work table, which he also didn't need to do. The president is very pleased. He mentioned your name specifically. That's kind. It reflects well on the whole department, a pause with texture in it, on me specifically, as the one who identified your talents. I set the letter down carefully and looked up. Paul's smile was doing its thing. I'd categorized this smile, I'd done it over months, as the smile that meant I think I'm winning something. I was thinking, he said, that we might grab dinner, just the two of us, to go over the event logistics. Somewhere nice. I know a good place in downtown. There were no event logistics that required dinner. Event logistics required email chains and a shared Google Doc, which is what we already had. I kept my face neutral. I think the planning is well in hand at this point, but I'm happy to schedule a working meeting if you feel there are gaps. The smile held. I do like that about you, he said. Very professional. A beat, in which professional meant something specific and not great. I'll let you get back to it, he said, and left. I took off my gloves and sat with my hands flat on the table and breathed through my nose for 30 seconds. Then I picked up my phone and started a note. Date, time, what was said, verbatim as I could reconstruct it. Cam was right. I needed a paper trail. If this continued, and it was going to continue, I could feel the shape of it. I needed documentation. I was going to handle this myself, carefully and thoroughly, and I was not going to drag Luke into it. That resolution lasted approximately 4 days. Chapter 10. The Incident at the Coffee Cart. Or, how I accidentally told Luke partial truths. It happened at the campus coffee cart, which operates just inside the main library entrance and which I visited every morning with the dedication of someone who had her whole personality organized around a routine. I was waiting for my Earl Grey, which the cart made perfectly, and which I was unwilling to compromise on, when I felt a presence materialize beside me in line. For one extremely disorienting second, I thought it was Paul. It was Luke, which was both better and caused a completely different set of problems. What are you doing here? I genuinely hadn't computed a scenario where he'd appear at my place of work at 8:15 in the morning. I'm meeting with the facilities manager about a potential renovation contract. He was already flagging down the cart operator. Coffee, please. Whatever the biggest size is. He looked at me. I have a 9 a.m. With the actual building people, I just showed up early. You're a morning person. I took a shot. He grinned. I was right. I'm a habitual person, I corrected, which you're exploiting. Absolutely. The coffee appeared. He paid before I could get my card out, and I gave him a look that said, we will be discussing this, and he gave me one back that said, no, we won't. Walk me to the lobby? I'm 10 minutes early, and I don't know this building. We walked. The library in the morning had a particular atmosphere I loved, quiet and alive at the same time. A few early students already settled at tables, the light coming in long and clear through the windows. Luke took it in with the eye of someone who thought about buildings structurally, which I knew meant he was noting ceiling heights and materials and load distribution even while keeping up a conversation. How's the job? He said. Real talk. Good. A beat. The exhibition is going well. He heard the beat. Of course he heard the beat. But. No but. Payton. You've had a butt face since you were 9 years old. I do not have a butt face. You do. Your chin does this thing. He gestured, vaguely in the direction of my chin. What's going on? I looked at the library around me, the place I loved, and thought about Paul and his dinners and his smiles and his strategic use of my professionalism against me. And I thought about how I'd told myself I wasn't going to drag Luke into this. My boss is difficult, I said. It's fine, I'm handling it. Luke was quiet for a moment, with the stillness that preceded him saying something real. What kind of difficult? Just, how to say this? He has a habit of making professional situations feel personal when they shouldn't be. That landed. I could see it land. Is he bothering you? The voice, very even. Very controlled. I'm dealing with it. That's not what I asked. I stopped walking and turned to look at him because I needed to see his face for this. He was looking at me with the expression I'd called his serious side for years. The Luke that lived underneath the easy grin that came out when something actually mattered to him. Jaw set. Eyes direct. Luke! I kept my voice steady. I am handling it. I have a plan. I'm documenting things. I'm fine. If he's... I know. Softer now. I know. But I need to do this myself, okay? It's my job and my professional situation, and I need to be the one who navigates it. He held my gaze for a long moment. I could see him actively restraining himself from whatever he was going to do, and the restraint itself told me something about what he'd wanted to do, and that was its own complicated data point. Okay, he said finally, but you tell me if it changes. It's probably nothing. You tell me anyway. I looked at him. Okay, I said. He nodded once, satisfied. Or as satisfied as he was going to get. Good. Now walk me to this facilities office because I'm pretty sure I could get lost in here and be found by a search party 3 days later. It's not that big. It's a maze. It's a library with a logical organizational system. A maze. He repeated firmly, and I turned to lead him down the hall, and the October light came through the tall windows and landed on us both, and I thought, I am so much more in love with this man than I can afford to be. Chapter 11. What Luke was thinking, because you deserve to know. Here's what I didn't know Luke was thinking that morning in the library. I know it now, because he told me later, in the way couples eventually confess the things they thought when they were still figuring each other out. So I'm telling you now because you shouldn't have to wait. Luke was thinking, who is this guy, and what's his name, and where does he work? That was the protective reflex, and he knew it. And he was also having a complicated conversation with himself about what it meant that his first instinct upon hearing that someone was making Payton's work uncomfortable was not concern, or not just concern, but something that sat in his chest like a very specific kind of anger. The kind that isn't about justice, the kind that's about mine, which was information he was not sure he was ready for. Because here's the thing about Luke. He is perceptive in the ways that matter and oblivious in the ways that are convenient, and for approximately 10 years he had been very conveniently oblivious about a certain set of feelings that had been accumulating in him like water behind a dam. He knew they were there, he just wasn't looking at them directly, the way you don't look directly at the sun. He'd thought about her in Seattle, more than occasionally, more than was strictly consistent with the childhood buddy explanation he'd given himself. He'd thought about the particular way she laughed at something genuinely funny versus the polite laugh she used when she was being kind. He'd thought about her in the library stacks, surrounded by all those books she loved. in one of those cardigans, with those glasses she didn't technically need. He'd thought about the way she'd said back in college, with that quiet directness that could drop right through you, "She's not right for you." He'd never asked her the obvious follow-up to that. He'd been too scared of what it would mean if he did. And now he was back, and she was here, and there was some guy at her job making her chin do the butt thing, and Luke Blackwood was standing in a library he was genuinely capable of getting lost in, and he was thinking, "I am an idiot. I have been an idiot for a very long time. I need to not be an idiot." He just didn't quite know how to start. Chapter 12, the part Tiffani orchestrated. 2 weeks after the bar, Tiffani called Luke. "He told me about this later too, so again, I'm letting you in now because it's more useful." She suggested dinner. "Just catching up," she said. Casual. He'd agreed, with the combination of good manners and vague guilt that she had always been skilled at producing in him. And then approximately 30 minutes after agreeing, he'd wondered why he'd agreed. Because Tiffani VanBuren in college, when he was honest with himself, had been more compelling as an idea than as an actual relationship. She was beautiful and socially magnetic and had made him feel important, which at 22 had been a more persuasive combination than it was at 29. And at 22 he'd been in a relationship with her, and also aware, constantly, of Payton existing nearby, and the two things had never resolved into anything comfortable. The dinner itself, as he reported it, she was charming and easy, and had clearly thought about it. She touched his arm when she laughed. She brought up old memories in ways that were flattering. She mentioned that she was the events coordinator for a downtown hotel, which meant she knew everyone and everything in Bozeman's social scene. And at some point, with perfect casual timing, she mentioned Payton. "I saw her at the tap room, your little friend." The little, not mean, just precise. "She's been at the university for a while now?" "In the library?" "Yeah, she loves it there." Tiffani smiled. "She always did like quiet places." "Luke, it's sweet how you always looked out for her. You were always so good about including her." "Including her?" Like Payton was a charity project. Like 10 years of real friendship was an act of magnanimous charity on his part. Something shifted in Luke's chest, hearing that. Not anger, not quite, but the precursor to it. The thing that comes before you realize you're offended. "She's my best friend," he said. Simple. Just that. Tiffani's smile didn't change. "Of course she is." He'd driven home from that dinner with the particular unsatisfied feeling of someone who'd eaten something that looked like it should be good and wasn't. And he'd thought about Payton's chin doing the butt thing in the library, and Tiffani saying including her in that particular tone, and some old half-remembered thing at the edge of his memory that he still couldn't quite grab onto. Something from the end-of-year party his senior year. Something important. He just couldn't get to it. Chapter 13, in which I have a very bad day and Luke shows up anyway. November. The exhibition was 3 weeks out, the planning was mostly on track, and Paul Sanders was escalating in the way I'd been watching him escalate for weeks. The implication getting slightly less veiled, the comments slightly more direct, the presence in my office doorway slightly more frequent and slightly more loaded. The Tuesday it went properly wrong, started normally enough. I was at my desk working through exhibition copy, the small text cards that go beside collection items, which have to be accurate and accessible and not too long, and I care about them unreasonably, when Paul came in and closed the door. He had never closed the door before. I put my pen down. He sat in the chair across from my desk. Not the doorway this time, the actual chair. And he looked at me with a smile fully deployed, and he said with the careful phrasing of a man who'd thought about this, "I've been looking at the department budget. There's a position opening up that I think would suit you very well. More responsibility, better title, commensurate compensation." I waited. "I'd be very much inclined to advocate for you." A pause. "If we could work together more closely." The room was very quiet. "I see," I said. "I think we understand each other." "I think we do," I said. "I think you've just made what functions as a conditional employment offer based on personal considerations, which is something I'm going to need to think about very carefully." The smile thinned just slightly. "I hope you won't take this the wrong way." "I hope so too." I stood up because I needed to be standing. "I appreciate you coming in, Paul. I have work to get back to." He looked at me for a moment, recalibrating, and I held his gaze and didn't blink, and then he stood and left, and I sat back down, and added to my documentation note with hands that were only very slightly unsteady. Date. Time. What was said, verbatim. The door being closed. This was now a different situation. This was now something I needed to do something about. I stared at my computer screen for a minute, and then I called Cam, because Cam was my emergency contact in situations that required both emotional support and strategic clarity. She answered on the second ring. What happened? I told her. HR, she said immediately. Today, if possible. Today is... I know it's scary. Do it anyway. I have the documentation. Good. Use it. What if? Payton. Her voice, steady and clear. You've been managing this for months. You've been patient and professional, and you have given him every chance to be a normal human being, and he has declined every single one. This is not your fault. You owe him nothing. You go to HR. I pressed the heels of my hands against my eyes. Okay? Today, okay? And then you call me when it's done. Okay. I made the appointment for 2 o'clock. I went. I sat across from a very calm, very professional HR director named Janet, who had clearly heard many things in her career and who did not flinch, not once, while I talked. I showed her the documentation. Printed out, because I'd learned this from Cam, you bring paper. And she asked clarifying questions and I answered them. And by the end, she told me the process that would follow, the investigation that would happen, the interim measures that would be put in place. I walked out of that office feeling approximately 17 things simultaneously, none of which I could have named individually, all of which together felt like, okay. I did that. I texted Cam, done. She sent back, proud of you. I was walking back through the library. It was 5 o'clock, most of the staff had gone. The late afternoon light was doing its amber thing in the stacks when my phone rang. Luke, I almost didn't answer. I was wrung out and fragile in the specific way you get after a day that required you to be very brave about something you didn't want to be brave about, and I wasn't sure I had the performance capacity for fine. But it was Luke. Hey, I said. Hey, a pause. You okay? Yeah. Payton, it's been a day. I'm outside. What? The library. I'm outside. I was in the area, and I thought. Another pause, and something in it that was un-Luke-like, slightly uncertain. Come get food with me. I stood in the amber stacks and thought about saying no, going home, being alone with Gerald the plant, and my own thoughts, and the careful quiet of my apartment. Give me 5 minutes, I said. He was leaning against his truck, parked on the circle drive in front of the building, in his jacket, with his hands in his pockets, and a look on his face when he saw me that I didn't know what to do with. Something careful in it. Something that was paying attention. You look like you fought something today, he said. I kind of did. Win or lose. I thought about Janet and the documentation and the process that was now in motion. Win, I think. Maybe. Check back in a month. He nodded. Something in him settled slightly. Okay. Food. What do you want? I looked at him. I stopped. Started again. I want something warm and not complicated. And I don't want to talk about the thing yet. Okay. I just want... My voice did something at the edges that I didn't plan, and I stopped again because this was embarrassing and I was not going to do this on the library front steps. Luke closed the space between us and put his arms around me. Just that. Just arms and warmth and the solid steadiness of him, and I pressed my face into his shoulder like I had when he left 5 years ago, and I breathed. Okay, he said, very quietly, into my hair. Okay, I've got you. We stood there for a moment that was too long to be casual and not long enough for what I actually needed it to be, and then he let go, and I pulled myself back together, and he took me to the Thai place on 19th. Not my usual Thursday place, a different one, better, he said, and he was right, and we sat in a corner booth, and I ate pho, and he made me laugh 3 times and didn't ask me once about the thing I'd said I didn't want to talk about. He knew when to push and when to let something breathe. He always had. On the walk back to the library parking lot, where I'd left my car, I told him about Paul. Not all of it, but enough. The pattern of it. The door-closing incident. The HR meeting. He walked beside me and listened with his hands in his pockets and his jaw in that set position, and when I finished, he was quiet for half a block. You handled that, he said finally. I did. Really well. I think so. I hope so. You did. Very definite. You documented. You reported. You have a paper trail. He looked at me sideways. You were more systematic about it than I would have been. What would you have done? He was quiet again for a moment. Something less systematic. Good thing I went first then. Agreed. He ran a hand through his hair. If this goes anywhere sideways, if anyone tries to retaliate or make things difficult. Luke, I'm just saying. I know you're just saying. I also have HR and university policy and my own very considered documentation. I looked up at him. I need you to let me fight this fight. He looked at me. That look. The one that was too many things at once. I know, he said. He stopped, tried again. I don't like the idea of someone. He stopped again. Someone? What? The look shifted into something more open, and for a moment, I thought he was going to say something real. Something that didn't live inside the fence of friendship and buddy and the other words we'd built our dynamic from. Someone thinking they can treat you like that, he said finally. Like you're just... He shook his head. You're not. I know I'm not. Good, you should know that. We'd reached my car. I unlocked it and turned around, and he was close. Not dramatically close, just the ordinary proximity of two people who'd walked together and arrived at a destination, and I looked at him in the parking lot light. Thank you, I said. For tonight. For the food and the not asking. Yeah? His voice was lower, somehow, in the quiet of the parking lot. Anytime. I got in my car and drove home. And I sat in my parking spot for a minute before going in, and thought about the way he'd said, I've got you on the library steps. I thought about the space between what that meant and what I needed it to mean. I went inside and told Gerald II about my day. Part 4, Where Things Fall Apart in Order to Come Together. Chapter 14, The Gala, Tiffany's Plan and the Universe Continuing to Laugh. 3 weeks later was the Faculty Appreciation Gala. The exhibition was, objectively, beautiful. I need you to know that because I worked very hard on it, and it mattered to me, and it was genuinely good. The Hargrove letters arranged chronologically with context cards, the photographs in conservation quality matting, the rare books in glass cases with proper lighting. Janet from HR had been quietly excellent in the intervening weeks, and the interim arrangement meant that Paul Sanders would not be attending the gala in any capacity that put him in my vicinity. This was a bureaucratic miracle, and I was grateful for it. I wore a dress I'd bought specifically for this, which was not something I normally did. But it was my work, and I was proud of it, and I wanted to look like someone who was proud of something. Dark wine red, fitted with off-the-shoulder sleeves. My hair was cooperating in a way it did maybe 3 times a year, the waves behaving, falling the way I wanted. I wore my glasses because it was my exhibition, and I refused to squint through it, even though I still told myself I didn't need them. Cam texted, "Send pic." I sent a pic. She sent back, "Payton Freeman. Luke is going to lose his entire mind. He's not going to be there," I texted back, because I hadn't told Luke about the gala. It was a professional event at my institution, not a thing to drag him into. She sent, "Interesting, we'll see." I didn't know what she meant by that. She refused to clarify. Here's what I also didn't know. Tiffani VanBuren was the event coordinator for a Bozeman hotel, as mentioned. She knew approximately everyone in Bozeman's professional and social landscape. She was also aware, through the efficient Bozeman Information Network, that Luke had done some initial consulting work for the University Facilities Department, the meeting he'd had the morning he'd shown up at the coffee cart. She had used this knowledge, with the tactical precision of someone who'd been executing this kind of maneuver since college, to ensure that Luke received an invitation to the gala through the university contacts, as a courtesy to a potential facilities contractor, which is how Luke Blackwood showed up at the Montana State University Faculty Appreciation Gala in a dark jacket and actual dress pants, with his hair pushed back and that jaw looking like it had been specifically designed to make me forget my own name. I didn't see him right away. I was doing the thing I'd been practicing in the mirror, which was standing near the Hargrove exhibition cases and talking knowledgeably to faculty and donors about the collection. I was actually good at this. I liked talking about the collection, and the genuine enthusiasm made the conversation easy. I was explaining the 1889 letters to a very interested history professor when I became aware, through some mechanism that had nothing to do with my 5 senses, that Luke was in the room. I looked up. He was looking at me. He was also, in the same moment, being approached by Tiffany, who materialized at his elbow with the practiced grace of someone who'd planned this exact approach. She was in something blue and striking, and she touched his arm and leaned up to say something, and I watched his expression flicker. Not unpleasantly, not pleased exactly, more surprised. She's here too. He recovered quickly, smiled, said something back, The history professor said something about the 1889 letters. I brought myself back to the conversation. Fine, I thought. He's here, she's here, I'm here. There is an entire room of other people. This is absolutely fine. I was wrong about almost all of that. Chapter 15. The Thing About the Night Getting Longer. Luke found me in the second hour, when the crowd had settled into comfortable clusters, and the speeches were done, and the champagne was circulating. I was standing near the window with a glass I'd barely touched, looking at the mountains, visible as dark shapes beyond the campus lights, and doing the internal recalibration that I periodically needed at crowded events. He appeared beside me with his own glass and looked at the mountains too. "This is really good," he said without preamble. "Thank you." The collection. The whole exhibition. You can feel that someone cared about it. I looked at the display cases, the careful lighting, the text I'd written. "Yeah?" I said. "I do." He was quiet for a moment. "You look." He stopped. "I look, what?" He looked at me, and something in the look was more unguarded than usual. More open. The gala around us was ambient noise and warm light, and none of it seemed to register on him. "Really good," he said. "Really, really good." My heart did its complicated thing. "It's the dress," I said. "It's not the dress." Very quiet. I turned to look at him, and the intensity in his expression surprised me, and I opened my mouth to say something. I don't know what, maybe something careful and friend-shaped, when a voice arrived from my left. "Luke, I've been looking everywhere for you." Tiffani, with a glass of champagne and the determined warmth of someone executing a plan. "Payton, your exhibition is adorable." Adorable. The exact word. I looked at Tiffani and I thought, she knows. She knows what she's doing, she's always known, and she's doing it now with a precision I genuinely have to admire in a completely hateful way. "Thank you," I said, and my voice was fine. I was good at this, remember. I had been practicing fine for years. I was just telling the president that Luke's company should absolutely be on the short list for the new facilities renovation. She touched Luke's arm again, that proprietary gesture. "I feel like I'm in such a good position to help with that, knowing everyone I know." "That's generous," Luke said, and his voice was polite, but I knew him well enough to hear the flatness underneath it. "It's just networking," Tiffani said. She smiled at me, the precise smile. "It's so lovely that you're still here, Payton, still at the library. Some people are just perfectly suited to exactly where they are." And there it was, the perfectly delivered needle. Still here. Still the library. Everything she meant without saying a word that could be held against her. I looked at her, and something happened that I hadn't planned, but that apparently had been building for approximately 10 years. "You know what I love about libraries?" I said conversationally. "The way everything has a place, and the systems make sense, and good things get preserved, and the things that don't have value just," I smiled, pleasant and unbothered, "get removed from the collection." A silence. Tiffani's smile held. "How poetic, isn't it?" Luke was looking at me with an expression that I would describe, in hindsight, as somewhere between delighted and reverent. "Oh," Tiffani said, recovering, "I should go say hello to excuse me." And she was gone, that particular departure that was technically graceful and also very pointed. Luke turned to me. He was grinning now, the real one. "The things that don't have value get removed from the collection." I was speaking generally, about weeding the stacks, about library science, Payton Freeman. The grin was doing the thing. "Where has that been all night?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "You absolutely do." He angled toward me slightly. "She was being awful to you." "I don't know what." "She's always been awful to you." He said it simply, like he was reporting an observation. "And I was slow on the uptake about it, in college, I mean." A pause. "I think I've been slow on the uptake about a lot of things." Something in that sentence opened up and I didn't know where to go inside it, and then someone arrived to talk to Luke about the facilities contract and the moment closed, and I turned back to the mountains outside the window and breathed. He found me again near the end of the night when the crowd was thinning and I was beginning to think about coats and fresh air. Walk out with me? He had his jacket over his arm and his keys in his hand and that look on him, the one I didn't have a name for but had been cataloging for years. We got our coats and went outside. November cold is different from October cold. October teases. November commits. The air had real teeth, and the mountains were invisible, and the campus was quiet and dark beyond the gala building's warm light. My breath made small clouds. We walked a little, not talking, that easy silence that I'd always been able to have with him, the kind that doesn't need filling. "Luke?" I said, because I was tired, and the gala had been hard in ways I hadn't fully admitted, and something about the cold clarity of the night felt like permission. "What did Tiffani say to you tonight when you arrived?" He glanced at me. "She said she'd arranged the invitation." "Arranged?" I turned to look at him. "She got you the invitation?" "Yeah, through the facilities contact." A pause. "I thought you'd invited me. Something about that. Something in the fact that he'd come, thinking it was from me." "No," I said. "I know that now." He stopped walking, and I stopped beside him. Payton. The way he said my name, sometimes a whole sentence compressed into 2 syllables. "Can I say something without you immediately telling me it's fine?" My heart did something irregular. "That depends on what you're saying." "Tiffani was always..." He stopped, tried again. "I wasn't." He ran a hand through his hair. "In college. I brought you everywhere, which you know. But I never..." He turned to face me. In the dark, those blue eyes were dark, but the look in them was as direct as it ever got. "I never asked you how that felt. Being dragged everywhere. Especially when Tiffani was there." I was very still. "I think I was using you," he said. "Not the way... not manipulatively. But you were always..." He seemed to be having trouble with this, which was unusual. Luke was usually fluent. "You made everywhere better. You made me feel..." He stopped again. "Settled. Like whatever was happening around me, you were a fixed point. And I think I relied on that, and I never asked if that was okay for you. The honesty of it sat between us in the cold." "It was okay," I said. And then, because it was the night it was, and because I was tired, and the gala had been long, and Tiffani had done her thing, and he had come thinking it was me, and it was also hard. Sometimes. He looked at me. Yeah. Hard why? I looked up at him, this man I'd loved since I was 17 years old, in the November dark outside a university building where I'd just stood up for myself twice in one evening. "Luke," I said. "You know why?" The silence after that was different from all the other silences. Weighted, full, the kind that asks a question and waits. He took a breath. "I need to tell you something," he said. "And I need to tell you that I probably needed to tell you this for a long time, and I'm not sure I know how to say it without it sounding like..." He stopped. "Payton, when I left, when I drove away to Seattle..." "You don't have to. Please let me finish." He stepped toward me, not dramatically, just the closing of a little more of the cold space between us. "The night before I left, you hugged me goodbye, and you pressed your face against my shoulder, and I held you, and I thought..." His voice, quieter now. "I thought, I am making the worst mistake of my life." The cold around us. The quiet campus. My heartbeat in my ears. "And I went anyway," he said. "Because I had a plan, and I was scared, and I didn't." He exhaled. "I didn't know if you felt it. I thought I'd probably made it up. Convinced myself of something that wasn't real. Luke, and I was an idiot," he said, blunt. "I think I've been an idiot for a very long time. And Tiffani's showing up and doing," he gestured back toward the building. "Whatever that was, and watching you just... the ghost of that grin, not the full one, more tender than that. You destroyed her with a library metaphor." I was talking about collection management. "Payton." He lifted his hand and tucked a wave of hair back from my face, and his fingers were warm against my cold cheek. And I looked up at him and I thought, this is the moment, the one that is either everything or a cliff edge. There is no in between. "Tell me," he said quietly, "tell me how long." I could have played it safe. I had been playing it safe for 10 years. I was so good at safe. "Since I was 17, I said. "Since you came home that Christmas and were somehow different, and I had no idea what to do with that." Something crossed his face, something that looked, from this close, like relief. "I told Tiffani." He stopped, and something flickered. "My senior year, at that end-of-year party, I'd had too much, and I was about to leave, and I told her." He shook his head. "I've never been able to fully remember what I said to her, but I know it was about you. I know whatever I said that night is why she ended things with me." "What did you say?" "I think," he said carefully, like he was excavating. I think I told her that I didn't know who I was without you. He looked at me. That I wasn't whole without you. Something like that. Something that probably sounded, he exhaled, probably sounded exactly like what it was. I wasn't whole without you. I stood in the cold and let that be real. You could have called, I said. From Seattle. From any point in 5 years, I thought. I know. You could have said something before you left. I know. That was a really long time to be an idiot, Luke. I know. Something around his eyes. Something I'd call anguished if he were anyone else, but on Luke it looked like the most honest thing I'd ever seen from him. I know. I'm sorry. I looked at him for a long moment, cataloging him the way I did, the jaw, the eyes, the hair brushing his collar in the cold, the 6'3" of him standing in the dark being sorry in the most genuine way I'd ever seen him be sorry about anything. Okay, I said. Okay? I mean, you're gonna have to do a lot of work to make up for 10 years of obliviousness. I kept my voice even. I feel like that should be stated up front. Something happened in his face. The tension broke and the real grin appeared. The full one. The one that reorganized your organs, and I'd been bracing for it, and it still got me. And he laughed, and the laugh went up into the cold November air, and his hands came up and framed my face. I can do that, he said. I have very high standards. I know you do. His thumbs brushed my cheekbones. I'm familiar with your standards. I've spent 10 years failing to meet them. You've been doing okay recently. Just okay? The pho was very good. The pho. He shook his head, laughing under his breath. I'm pledging my entire heart here, and you're bringing up the pho. The pho was emotionally significant. Payton Freeman. His forehead dropped to mine, and we were close and warm despite the cold, and I had waited 10 years for this moment, and I was absolutely going to make him work for it a little, but also I was maybe done waiting. The thing about being a librarian, I said very quietly, is that I'm extremely good at being patient. I know, but I've closed this particular book. I'm done with it. Good, he said. I'm starting a new chapter. And then he kissed me, there in the November cold, outside the library that I loved, and it was nothing like safe, and everything like coming home. Epilogue, some things I know now, the things I know now, in no particular order. Luke makes terrible coffee but is so enthusiastic about the process that it's hard to be annoyed about it. Tiffani VanBuren, when she heard about us, posted something pointed on Instagram that I only know about because Cam texted me a screenshot. I looked at it for about 4 seconds and then put my phone down and went back to reading. Some things don't deserve more than 4 seconds. The HR process at the university took 2 months. Paul Sanders is no longer the director of library services. I'm not going to tell you what he is now because I genuinely don't think about it, and you should feel the same. The Hargrove Collection exhibition got written up in the MSU Alumni magazine with my name on the piece. Luke framed it. This was embarrassing, and I told him so, and he hung it in his office anyway. My 4 plants are thriving. Gerald has 3 new leaves. Luke is in my apartment approximately 5 evenings a week, which started because he claimed his had bad Wi-Fi and then admitted, when pressed, that he just liked being wherever I was. I had known this for 10 years, so I was not surprised. I told him so. He said something impossible, and I threw a cardigan at him, and he caught it and kissed me, and we were fine. We're always fine. We were always going to be fine. I think we both knew that, in the place where you know things before you can say them. It just took one of us longer to say it out loud, and the other one of us 10 years of patience and one very good library metaphor. The mountains are doing their winter thing now. All white and absolute against the blue Montana sky. I can see them from the window of the library, from my not quite an office, past Gerald and his new leaves. It's a good life. It's a warm one. And I'm keeping it. And this is where our story ends for today. If you enjoyed tagging along for this journey, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that this story is worth sharing, and it lets me know to create more content like this. If you want to make sure you don't miss the next chapter, subscribe and ring that bell. I've got more stories lined up that you definitely won't want to miss. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.